The Exorcist Believer is now in theaters and probably will be completely left in the dust this weekend when everybody watches the new Taylor Swift movie. But what did I ultimately think about this movie? And should you be checking it out in theaters, or should you be just waiting for streaming for this one? Well, stick around and let's talk about it. When two girls disappear into the woods and return 3 days later with no memory of what happened to them, the father of one girl seeks out Chris MacNeil, who's been forever altered by what happened to her daughter 50 years ago. The film stars Linda Blair, Ellen Burstyn, Jennifer Nettles, Leslie Odom Jr., Olivia O'Neill, Ian Dowd, Lidya Jewett, and Raphael Sbarge, and was directed by David Gordon Green, and he's done films like The Sitter, Your Highness, Pineapple Express, and the Halloween trilogy. Going into The Exorcist Believer, when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, here we go. We got another whole Exorcist film into the franchise. And knowing that it was David Gordon Green, I wouldn't say I was very excited, but I was at least hopeful that it would be at least half decent. I mean, obviously, this is a film that really can't measure up to the original. And, I never really technically expected it to, but I was just hoping it to be at least half decent. I will say this though, films like this and exorcism films, I feel like they are so hard to accomplish. It seems with a lot of people, they're very picky with exorcism films. I remember last year when Pray for the Devil came out, I actually really liked that film. A lot of people were like, oh, it's so generic and they did a lot of the same stuff. I mean, I feel like there's only so much you can really do with exorcism films. But with this film, I have to say that I really did not like this film. I went with my son and we went on a Tuesday night, and there was pretty much nobody in the theater, about two other people in the theater besides both of ourselves. And I just felt like this movie, I did like the opening with it, the whole story with the earthquake, and then the father actually having to decide whether to actually have his daughter survive or the wife actually survive. I like that choice, and I like that they actually have that in the film. I think overall with this film, I think the story, it does make sense. It flows well within the story to actually having it make sense, but I really felt like this film, it really lacked scares for me. I felt like throughout this film, there was a lot of wasted time. I felt like a lot of times in this film, there was just completely no tension. Within the original film, obviously, it's a slower film, in the 70s. The pacing of films are a little bit different back in those days. But I always felt with that film that they always brought a lot of tension. I felt like a lot of the stuff in that film was very dirty. The way that they treated that girl and the way that, she just had the way of her language and her body language in that film. The whole scene where she turns her head around and everything like that. That is an iconic scene. With this one, I felt like it just lacked a lot of style, and I felt like the pacing of this film really dragged it down. We get to learn about this father and how he has lost his faith and the fact that his wife passed away. He's on his own. And then we see his neighbor, who happens to be a nurse, and we see her character for a brief moment where she is telling him to bring in the trash can. She is that asshole of a neighbor. Obviously, it's really hard to really care about her character because she is that kind of character. And there's a point in this film where she literally goes up to the doorstep and she starts talking about her story and about how she had an abortion and all that. And I was like, I just don't buy this at all, because you show her at one point where she is nagging this guy and just on him about really stupid stuff that doesn't matter, and then we're supposed to actually change and shift our feelings towards this character. I felt like I didn't have that connection towards her character at all. The other problem I had with this film is, so you have the two girls that obviously go in the woods and they go missing, which that's fine, I don't have a problem with that, but I felt like the white girl Catherine, I didn't really ever connect to her character. I connected more with Angela than I did the white girl. And I felt like she had more powerful scenes, I would say, than the white girl. The white girl's family, her family is very religious. So you have that compare and contrast. I just felt like with them being friends, I felt like they kind of just rush into that a lot, and they don't really develop that friendship much, and we're supposed to care about these girls being friends, but I felt like because there isn't much time really diving into that friendship, that the film, it suffers for me actually caring for that character. And I just felt like a lot of times with this film too, with the lack of tension with a lot of times and not really any scares, I felt like the soundtrack wasn't very good in this film. I felt like there was no points in time where I felt like these eerie moments were coming with the music. I didn't feel like a lot of things in this film really amped it up for me. My son went with me to this film, and he even said about halfway through, we were about an hour in, he's like, how much longer of this film is there to go? Because it wasn't actually captivating him, and I felt the same. And I just felt like the slow pacing of this film, and just, it didn't feel like it was building at times. It felt like there are times where they would have a scene and they would have like a little bit of a horror moment. There was like a crucifix scene that I really did like, where someone gets stabbed with a crucifix. I'm like, all right, I think this is where the film is going to really amp up. And it kind of does in a way, but it's not what I was expecting, I think. And I think that's the problem with this film, because it's one of those films where you're taking an iconic franchise, a franchise that a lot of people really love, and you're not really creating any style to it. At this point, I've seen a lot of horror movies, so I don't feel like I'm really scared a lot of times. So with this film, though, I just felt like a lot of times, scratching my head, was this a horror film? Because I felt like at times it didn't feel like a horror film. I felt like there was a little bit of drama there. Then they have other characters like the pastor in here that I felt like were just really useless characters. You bring back older characters to have like these small cameos, which, they bring a little bit of flavor to it, but I wouldn't say like a lot of flavor to it. Through the end of the film and just, the whole exorcism going down, obviously, because there's going to be an exorcism in this. Obviously, it's called The Exorcist. I felt like the CGI wasn't very good. I felt like towards the end there, I felt not exactly what I knew was going to happen, but I felt like you kind of were on the point where you're like, okay, so I think I know what's going to happen, but maybe not. And then they just pull this monkey wrench out where they have this particular character and family that I obviously didn't like. They throw the father in, and he does this one thing that just was like, okay, this pisses me off. I don't know why they're going this route. And the way that they ended the film, I'm just like, I don't know how they're going to continue on with this and make this a trilogy and also make people really care about it, because again, it lacks horror, it lacks scares, it lacks tension, it lacks so much to make you really care. And I felt like I just didn't care by the end of this film. A lot of exorcism films, like I was saying earlier on in the review, a lot of them can be very generic. And last year when Pray for the Devil came out, like, I understand where people thought that was generic, but I really like the story, and I felt like they did a better job of actually creating tension, creating setting. I don't feel like this film, it really created setting. I felt like we have a lot of characters in this film, and a lot of characters that are just a lot of fluff, and not characters that I actually give a crap about. And that's the biggest problem with this film. So as far as a score for this film, I would give it a 2 out of 5. It's a meh film. It's not the worst of the year. For a horror film, I think it's not very good. And I definitely feel like this is a film that I don't see myself revisiting. I don't see me purchasing it. I just don't feel like the need that I ever need to revisit this film, unfortunately. And that's why I can only give it a 2 out of 5. I would definitely recommend you wait for streaming. Don't waste your money on it, because it's definitely disappointing overall for me. But let me know in the comments, what did you think about The Exorcist Believer? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you just think it was kind of meh? And if you haven't checked it out, are you going to check it out on streaming, or are you going to skip it altogether? Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys on my next review.